investigation, because in less than 24 hours we had the suspect in custody. Based on the information I have, 2 employees that work there engaged in a verbal altercation in the kitchen that eventually led to a fist fight. The fist fight spilled out of the kitchen into the back alley of the restaurant. At one point during the altercation, the suspect walked into what is being described as an employee locker room area, where we believe he retrieved a handgun. 1 round was fired by the suspect towards the ground. That round did splinter into 2 pieces, striking another employee in the leg, a person who was not involved in the original altercation, as well as a second person who was not an employee of the restaurant. Both those people sustained non-life-threatening injuries. The one employee was struck in the leg. The other non-involved individual was struck in the upper arm from fragments of the bullet. The suspect did immediately leave the scene. Our gun violence unit did an amazing job putting together information, retrieving SafeCam video, and based on that work, the suspect today surrendered himself to the custody of the gun violence unit detectives this morning. He's identified as Tysheen Evans. He's a 27-year-old male from Buffalo. He has been charged with reckless endangerment in the first, as well as criminal possession of a weapon. The suspect was arraigned this afternoon, I believe, and he was remanded to the Erie County Holding Center. So with that, I can take some questions.
Could you spell Tysheen, please?
I believe it's spelled Tysheem Evans of Buffalo.
So with the whole splintering of the bullets, that sounds almost like a complete freak accident, especially in the fact that the intended target wasn't even the one that was hit. Does that happen very often? Is that something that you've seen before?
We've seen it. I mean, when bullets hit solid objects that don't move, one of a couple things can happen. They generally will splinter or impact. In this case, he is not charged with, obviously, attempted murder. He's not charged with an assault. The reckless endangerment first is where a person showing reckless disregard for the safety or life of another person commits an act that could potentially lead to death or serious physical injury. So hence the charge is appropriate in this case. Any firing of a bullet anywhere, especially around or in proximity to other people, is dangerous. And as we saw here, thankfully the bullet fractured into small enough pieces that although it caused injury, it didn't take somebody's life.
And you would say he surrendered himself this morning?
Correct.
Any update on why did they fight? What happened? They worked together a long time? Any kind of history or background on that?
You know, that's something our detectives are still reviewing. I mean, it's a typical case of workplace violence. It starts off as a verbal altercation, it escalates into a fist fight, and again, as we've seen too often, somebody resorts to pulling a handgun out, and you know, this is the result. Thankfully, nobody was killed in this process.
I mean, yeah, it's just last week, Niagara Metals, that was pretty, ended up very badly last week. Is this a concern with more workplace violence, not only, obviously here, is that incidents, but across the country?
Well, unfortunately in this country, we do see acts of workplace violence, and when you say that term, you have to define it. It can be fistfights, it could be up to what we saw at Niagara Metals, which appears, in my opinion, to be a targeted, that was not an altercation where somebody died, that was somebody coming back to work the next day and just basically executing somebody. So it's something that, obviously employers have to be concerned about, they have to look at, they have to be on guard against to the best of their abilities. But again, it is very rare in our community, thankfully, that we see this. Unfortunately, we had 2 back-to-back incidents that could be deemed workplace violence, but for the most part, we're not seeing that. But I think this case highlights the dangers of guns. There is no place in the workplace for somebody to have a gun, and the fact that somebody would go retrieve a gun obviously calls into question his motives in terms of what his intention was with that weapon in his hand.
So what was Mr. Evans' job at the Allen Burger?
He worked in the kitchen.
We know that the restaurant was closed last night. It's also closed today. In your conversations with the owners of the restaurant, are they going to be making any changes, or how are you feeling after this altercation happened?
Well, obviously they're shooken up. Something like this happens, it's pretty dramatic. Nobody hires people that they think would engage in this activity. When something like this occurs, I'm sure they, just like any other business, has to kind of hit reset for a moment. they have concerns of their other employees, that they feel safe and sound coming to work, and I'm sure that that's the process that they're currently working through.
You talked about the great work that the gun violence detectives did. I know in a lot of cases, even though people know the suspect, they're afraid to come forward. Is it rare that something like this has such a quick turnaround where you have an arrest less than 24 hours after?
It's definitely on the higher end in terms of how quickly they were able to bring this to a conclusion. You know, in a case like this, our SafeCam video played a very crucial role, but I cannot commend the gun violence unit enough. They kind of don't get a lot of recognition for what they do. Every single non-fatal shooting that occurs in the city falls on those detectives, and they work these cases tirelessly. So this is definitely kudos to them in terms of their quick response to the scene, securing witnesses, securing evidence, and the same dedication that went into this case is what goes into each and every case. And when they're able to make an arrest and do what they did, you know, that makes them feel great about what they're doing. And trust me, their desire is to do this in each and every shooting case in the city.
Can the general public relax a little bit about the perception of how safe the area is? You know, because
Yeah,
it's a nice area.
Allentown is a super safe entertainment area, as is Chippewa, as is all parts of the city. You know, this is a random thing that occurs, but it's not a random act of violence. This was a workplace violence issue that just got out of hand. But in terms of the effect it should have on the public, you know, that's a great restaurant. I mean, everything on Allen Street is great. Everything in the city, restaurant-wise, you know, we see the investment in the city. We see what's going on all over the city. Parts of the city that were industrial wastelands are now vibrant areas. And I think that the message is, you know, the police department responds and quickly reacts to these things. They investigate them, they make arrests, and the number one concern from that business is for their customers and employees.
Captain Ronaldo, can you just provide a quick refresher course, maybe just on the SafeCam program, since it played a key role?
Sure. We started the SafeCam program back in 2017, and part of it is not only the surveillance cameras that the city owns, so the ones that you see hanging off of street lights and traffic signals, but it's also creating a mesh network of business surveillance videos. We have well over 1,000 different private residences as well as businesses that have registered their cameras. SafeCam is vital though, because although we don't get direct access to your cameras, what it does is creates a database of where our detectives can go look for video footage in situations where there was a crime that occurred in a public space. So again, I encourage residents, I encourage businesses, through our BPD website, you can register your camera system, and really that time that it removes from the investigation to be able to quickly reference a database, look at where they should go find cameras. Time is of the essence in investigations, and in this case, it definitely played a role.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
On topic, any update on Officer Defoe?
As of right now, I was able to speak to his fiancee this afternoon. His condition remains the same. It is still very crucial. He is considered stable, but still under critical care. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family right now, but according to the update I received, it's still going to be quite some time before we know anything further.
Was any new evidence discovered during the searches, or I know there was a lot of area to search, anything new, any updates like that?
At this time, no. The one individual was charged in connection to the crash. A second individual was charged in relation to something not having to do with the crash, and the other two were not able to be charged.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.